We are the Association for Child and Adolescent Mental Health, or ACAMH for short, and this is ACAMH Learn.
Hi, I'm Erin Gonzalez. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I'm going to talk about common myths about ADHD and what the research tells us about which ones are true and which ones are busted. Our first myth is, my child will outgrow ADHD. For the most part, this one is false. We used to think of ADHD as a childhood disorder, and that by the time you turn 18, you're an adult, it's no longer going to be an issue. Our research shows that that's true for about half of kids. By the time they're 18, they won't technically meet criteria for a diagnosis of ADHD anymore. That's often due to brain development catching up, learning good skills for how to handle distractibility and disorganization, and the very real phenomenon that hyperactivity gets to be less and less over time. But that means about half of kids diagnosed with ADHD will still meet full criteria to be diagnosed with ADHD as adults. And what more recent research shows is that even if you're not diagnosed with ADHD as an adult, you're probably going to have some lingering symptoms. Almost everybody with childhood ADHD has some symptoms that last into adulthood, usually things related to organization and keeping track of your schedule and things that you need to bring with you. So that means it's not a great idea to just wait and see with ADHD and hope that it gets better over time. It is really important to figure out if that diagnosis fits your child and start setting them up for success early, getting them resources they need and possibly treatment that they need so they can have the skills into their teen and adult years to prevent ADHD from being a major problem in their lives. Our next myth is ADHD is overdiagnosed. This one is actually mostly true. The rates of diagnosis of ADHD have been skyrocketing, especially in the last 1 to 2 decades. ADHD is talked about in pop culture, in the movies, in the media a lot. There's a lot more awareness of it. So people are going out and actually asking to be evaluated and diagnosed with ADHD, which has not been the case in the past. That also means that a lot of people are getting kind of quick, hasty evaluations or being told after just a few minutes of conversation with a professional or doctor that yes, they do have ADHD and they need treatment. Doctors are great at diagnosing ADHD, but there should be a process of looking at rating scales, of how the symptoms show up in different situations, and ruling out any other possible explanations for that distractibility. And unfortunately, there's often not a lot of time to do that in typical doctor visits. So it's true that although we believe the rate of ADHD in the world is about 10%, which is really high to begin with, some places have rates of diagnosis as high as 15% or even higher. So yes, ADHD is overdiagnosed, especially in populations of people who have a lot of resource and a lot of trust in the medical system. However, the reason it's only mostly true is that there are many people with ADHD who don't have access to evaluations to get that diagnosis in the first place, especially groups of people who don't have as many resources, don't have access to good medical care, or have had bad experiences with medical professionals in the past. So some people who would really benefit from getting that diagnosis and getting access to resources and treatment are going undiagnosed. So that's why it's a little bit complicated, but for the most part, yes, I think we can all agree that ADHD is being overdiagnosed right now, and you need a really good, thorough, careful evaluation to make sure that that diagnosis is accurate. Our next myth is that you have to be hyperactive to have ADHD. This one is definitely false. Back in the 80s and 90s, we really mostly believed that hyperactivity was a core feature of ADHD. You think of kids who really can't stay in their seat or climbing on things, running around, way more energy than other kids. But we know now that's only about 50% of people with ADHD or children with ADHD have that hyperactive piece, and about 40% have just the inattentive piece. That final 10% are people who have only hyperactive symptoms and no distractibility. That's kind of unusual. But yes, it is possible to have ADHD predominantly inattentive subtype. This used to be what we called ADD, and that means you've got the symptoms of distractibility, inattention, losing track of things, having trouble with organization, but you don't have a high energy level. You might have an average energy level, or even sometimes a slightly below average energy level compared to other people. Our next myth is if my child can focus on video games, then they don't have ADHD. I hear this one from parents a lot. They may see that their child can kind of hyper focus, sometimes for many hours, on things that are exciting, new, or interesting to them. Often that's video games or something else creative, playing with Legos, building things, doing a creative art project. And this is very much a common part of ADHD. ADHD is not actually a lack of attention and focus. It's what we call a dysregulation of attention and focus, which means that you just can't control well what things can hold your attention and which things can't. So when a person with ADHD finds something that they love, that's really exciting, that gives their brain a lot of that dopamine reward chemical, they can zoom into that and focus sometimes for many hours. This can lead to a lot of creativity, new ideas, outside of the box thinking. But even if your child can hyper focus for hours on one thing, they may struggle to focus even for a minute or two on other daily tasks that aren't giving them that dopamine and sense of reward. So this one is busted. It's very much the case that even if your child hyperfocuses, they could still have ADHD and inattention that's causing a big impact on other areas of their lives. Our next myth is therapy can cure my child's ADHD. I think we often believe that if there's a mental health issue going on, therapy should be the go-to. Get my child a great person to talk to who can motivate them and help get them to focus. But this myth is really busted, especially for younger children. Talk therapy, one-on-one therapy in a professional's office just doesn't lead to learning and practicing skills that can be used in everyday life. So kids with ADHD really need support at what we call the point of performance, or basically in their real world setting. Kids are going to learn skills by having adults give them feedback and structure in the classroom, during their daily routines, during sports activities, at social events. And therapy, one-on-one therapy, actually doesn't have any evidence to help control ADHD symptoms, and definitely not to cure ADHD. So for younger kids, especially, the first type of behavioral treatment or therapy that will help is actually working with the parents, because you're there many, many hours of the week. If you're equipped in a coach role, your child's getting lots of intervention in their real lives rather than 1 hour a week in an artificial setting like a quiet office. So if ADHD is the main concern you have for your child, look into parent behavior management training rather than individual child therapy. Our last myth is ADHD medications will change my child's personality. This one is mostly false, but there are some situations where it can be true. If your child's medications are being very carefully managed and the dose is the right fit for them and the type of medication is the right one for them, you should see their wonderful personality shining through. It is true that ADHD medications can make kids a bit more serious. They're not going to be as silly and distractible. So sometimes that seems a little bit different from their usual sunny, cheerful, hyperactive personality, even. But it shouldn't change who they are. Sometimes I hear this concern from adults who knew people or who themselves took ADHD medications back in the 90s when we knew a lot less about how to dose them correctly, and they weren't formulated in quite as helpful of a way as they are now. There have been tons of advances in medications for ADHD in the last 10 to 20 years, so that they now release very gradually, and we avoid that situation where they have a very strong effect and then they wear off very sharply. So if your child's personality is really drastically changed by medication, or if you see your child seeming really flat or like a zombie, it's a good idea to talk to your doctor. That's not a side effect you should have to tolerate. And there are many, many options of medications that would be likely to be a better fit for your child.